thank you so much for talking to us. And thank you for writing this year's Christmas tree poem, The Fourth King. We're really happy to have worked with you and really excited to see this year's poem, Decorating the Christmas Tree in Trafalgar Square. I wondered if we could start off by, if you would mind reading the poem for us.
Sure. The Fourth King. They found me high above the breathing canopy, tight-jacketed prodigy, interstellar silence laced through my hair, and frost like a tapestry nailed to my door. Such absolute dark above my tippy-top spangled crown, ballooning sky-shot Arctic greens draped winter's finest shawl about my shoulders. Unstable starship of the planet, your lungs are my fingers, their feather-thin million branching endings, tiny bright, tiny light, redeemers of air. Spectacular child in the barn who fell like a comet or windfall. I also attend. I also stand in all my pine needle finery and shine.
Amazing, thank you so much. So obviously the poem is about the arrival of the Christmas tree all the way from the city of Oslo to London. But I wanted to ask whether you might talk a little bit about the particular path that you took to write this poem. So what in that story inspired you?
So when Judith explained what the Trafalgar Square Christmas Tree Poem Commission was, I was immediately inspired by the idea of this tree, this special tree that has been so carefully chosen from, I imagined, the high Arctic, you know, the taiga trees that surround the top of the planet like a protective belt. And I imagine that this one, I know this one is very, very tall. So I imagine this one kind of sticking up above all the other fir trees in that Arctic belt and kind of being like, you know, the specialness of this example of a tree kind of really spoke to me, and the fact that it's selected to go on this journey, and that it's a gift, and that it's for Christmas, and that it's a gift from one nation to another nation at this time of gift giving and celebration. So all of those things immediately kind of lit up my mind, and I felt very inspired to focus on the tree itself as a kind of special instance of Christmas spirit, I suppose.
Lovely, yeah, that definitely comes through. It's such a sparkly and special feeling poem. I wondered as well if you could talk a bit about the title, so The Fourth King. I know we talked about a couple of different titles, and I wondered what made you land on that one.
Yeah, so well, the poem goes on its own journey, as all good poems should, so that you end up somewhere you kind of didn't expect when you started the poem, but also somewhere that logically fits with the story of the poem at the same time. And so I start with the kind of selection of the tree, and then you know, I'm thinking very much about the Arctic in winter and how completely dark it would be up there. And one of the big contrasts through the poem, of course, is light and darkness, which is again in keeping with the message of Christmas time. And so I imagined, you know, in that absolute dark, that's when the Arctic lights would be visible above the tree's head. So from this kind of dark forest and dark sky, but with very, very special Arctic light effects, the tree travels. And I was thinking in the middle of the poem about this particular time when we are in climate crisis and how important trees are to our sustainable future as a species and to the future of all life on the planet. And I then wanted to kind of bring the tree into attendance at Jesus's birth, along with the wise men who also went on their journey to worship the baby. And it was this idea that the tree is so important, and trees are so important to us as a species. They carry salvation within their DNA in the way that in the Christmas story, Jesus came as our salvation. So I wanted to bring all that together at the very end, and I wanted the idea of the tree to also attend the cradle of the baby Jesus as a kind of act of honor for the possibility of redemption that that birth holds.
Beautiful, yeah. And it's an amazing image, isn't it? The kind of surreal but wonderful, the image of this Norwegian spruce at the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
But I love that. I think it's brilliant.
And you know, we bedeck our trees at Christmas time, don't we? I mean, we put crowns on their heads as though they are kingly, and we bring the outside into our houses, and we, in a way, we honor the tree with the lights and the decorations. But that is a symbol of this other honoring. So I just wanted to bring those two things together at the end.
Yeah, brilliant. You've kind of talked a bit about this already, but I wonder if you might tell us about your Christmas, what rituals you have, what you do with your tree. And yeah, you've talked a lot about like light and darkness and all of the Christmassy things, but what does Christmas mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I actually don't like Christmas very much. I mean, there's certainly a lot about Christmas that I find very difficult. And I think the kind of compulsion to overspend and to get a lot of things that we don't need, and to eat a lot of food that we don't need to eat. I find that aspect of Christmas really difficult, and I find it increasingly difficult because I don't think the way that Christmas is often celebrated, I don't think simply the planet can't sustain that. And it can be very wasteful. But there is this kind of core thing about Christmas that I do absolutely love, which is connected to it being the darkest time of the year, and which is connected to generosity and love and family and you know, making kind of decorating the dark, really, you know, to kind of carry us through to spring. We have this festival of light in the darkest moment of the year. So all of those things about Christmas I do really love, and I love the way that the world stops. I think it's so important that we build in, you know, pauses and stops and silences and quiet time into our totally over hectic existences. So that's maybe my favorite thing about Christmas of all, is that the world stops. So it will be very simple, but I think inspired by having engaged with this commission and thinking about Christmas trees, I'm definitely going to have a Christmas tree every year. This year, I didn't have one last year. I abdicated. But I'm going to have one this year, and it's going to be a proper one. But I might get one in a pot rather than kill a tree. I might get one in a pot that I can keep and reuse. So I've seen some in Morrison's at the bottom of and very simple, just something spectacular at the top.
Great. You can put your own crown on the top. Well, thanks for all of this. I wonder if we might finish, if you have any ideas about how people might be able to write their own poem inspired by this particular Christmas tree, which is, you know, a thanks from Norway for the British support during the Second World War, or Christmas trees in general, or your poem in more particular terms.
Well, I was kind of so inspired by the idea of this incredible, special tree, that I wanted to not write about the tree from my perspective, but try and go inside the tree. And I love poems which are in non-human voices. And I just think that they can be so kind of free and imaginative, and you can play around with language in a way that you can if you're just being yourself, or if you're just being a human. You can kind of be more playful and unexpected with language and word choices. So certainly one of the things that you might like to do is not just write about the tree, but write about the tree in the voice of a tree, as you might imagine that to be. So not only, so if you're going to do that with anything that you want to write, if you want to take on the voice of anything that's not human, which is a really fun thing to do, I would recommend all young poets to try and do this. You've got to ask yourself 2 questions. So the first question is, what would this particular object say? So is there a kind of story around this particular object, or, you know, what's happening to this object? Where does this object belong? What's happening to it? What's going to happen at the end of the poem? Those kind of normal poem questions. But you've also got to ask yourself a really important second question, which is, how would my non-human object say whatever it has to say? So what kind of words sound like this thing, or have a kind of thinginess about them? So when I was thinking about writing this poem to honor this tree, and then I thought, I want to be the tree. So then I thought, well, what sounds or words would a Christmas tree, would a Norway spruce sound like? What is its experience of the world that would color and influence its vocabulary and its word choices? And you know, that fabulous sound of forest in wind, you know, it can be a bit like rain or a bit like rustling. I wanted to get kind of those sounds into the poem, and also the magic of its environment, you know, the kind of the Arctic lights and the kind of spangly dark silence of this time of year in the high north. So I was really playing around with those kind of sounds for the voice of my tree as well. So that's something that you can try yourself.
Amazing. That's really great and very helpful. I think it's very important, especially the second point. I think we go straight to what is the story behind this object, but we sometimes forget that, you know, the voice is just as important, and you just sort of you assume that it's going to sound exactly like you might write it, or however you think a poem should sound. But yeah, definitely worth thinking about, how can I make this sound like a tree? So brilliant. Thank you so much. That's been...
Yeah, you're welcome. My pleasure.
Great.